My eyelids fluttered open to the whisper of unfamiliar silk brushing against my skin. This was not my cramped apartment in Lincoln Park with its leaking ceiling and the endless hum of that old refrigerator. The air here carried a faint trace of expensive perfume, sandalwood laced with something denser, more dangerous. Nothing like the cheap lavender spray I had misted around my room before going out last night. Last night, my 28th birthday. I sat up too fast, and pain surged through my skull in protest. The room tilted, then slowly steadied within my vision. A vast bedroom unfolded before me, its floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the Chicago skyline like a dream, from a height I guessed no less than 30 stories. Morning light slipped through half-drawn curtains, tracing every detail of the space until I forgot to breathe. Everything looked too foreign, too perfect. The thick carpet swallowed my feet. Dark walnut furniture gleamed. A crystal chandelier glittered above like frozen glass, and abstract paintings hung with careful precision on ash-gray walls. Nothing here belonged to the world I knew. I pulled the blanket closer, the cool silk against my bare skin making my stomach tighten in alarm. I wasn't wearing anything. My dress from last night and even my underwear had vanished. My heart pounded wildly. I looked around, searching for clues, grasping for fragments of memory, but everything from last night shattered like glass. Laughter, blurred lights, sweet cocktails that hit like a blow to the head, wild dancing, the taste of recklessness, and then an image. A man, tall, with eyes that cut through the air. I couldn't recall his name, or perhaps I'd never known it. The bathroom door swung open suddenly, a cloud of steam billowing out, and he stepped through. Not at all what I had imagined the most dangerous man in Chicago would look like. No scars, no savage expression, only the quiet, lethal composure of someone who ruled without effort. A towel hung low around his hips, beads of water slid down tanned skin, tracing the sharp lines of his chest and stomach. His dark hair was slicked back, exposing high cheekbones and a firm jaw. When his amber-brown eyes caught the morning light, they glinted with a cold gold that rooted me in place. "You're awake," he said, his voice deep and smooth, like aged whiskey. I clutched the blanket tighter, the weight of imbalance between us pressing on my chest. He stood there, confident and half-naked, while I curled beneath a blanket that wasn't mine, in a world that wasn't mine. My throat felt dry. Where am I? The words trembled out of me. He moved toward the wardrobe, opening a drawer as though the situation were entirely ordinary. My apartment, 34th floor, downtown Chicago. He glanced at me through the mirror. "As for what happened last night, you had too much to drink. Your friends left. I brought you here." My stomach nodded. "Did we?" "No," he cut in, voice so firm it sent a chill through me. "I don't touch unconscious women." A shiver ran the length of my spine. "How do you know my name?" He turned, one eyebrow lifting slightly. "I make it a habit to know everyone who steps into my territory." His eyes narrowed faintly. "Especially those who are interesting." The word interesting landed like a sentence, and I felt pinned beneath his gaze, like a butterfly pressed under glass. And in that instant, I began to understand my 28th birthday had led me somewhere no wish or blessing could bring me back from. If you're still listening, perhaps you can feel the tension threading between Claire and Lucas, the place where the line between safety and captivity begins to blur. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share, so you won't miss the next chapters filled with drama and emotion each day. Tell us where you're listening from, your city or your country. Every comment is a footprint, letting us know how far our stories have traveled and how many hearts they've reached across the world. Lucas turned back to the wardrobe, pulled a black shirt from its hanger, every motion measured, deliberate. The silence held only the ticking of a wall clock and the pounding of my heartbeat in my chest. "I told your friend you're safe," he said without looking back. "Your phone's on the table. You have 19 missed calls." I followed his gaze to see my purse resting neatly on a velvet chair near the window. "Why did you help me?" My voice came out hoarse, caught between fear and confusion. He slipped on his shirt and faced me, his eyes sharp as a blade but his tone unexpectedly gentle. "Because if I hadn't intervened, the two men watching you at the bar wouldn't have just taken you home." My body froze, curling in on itself. "Who were they?" "Costello's men," Lucas replied, fastening his buttons as his eyes studied mine. "They recognized you were with Maya Delgado, Jake Delgado's sister." "Jake works for me." I tried to piece together fragments of the night. Maya my closest friend from college, had begged me to go out because it was my 28th birthday. She had picked the black dress I'd always been too shy to wear, and we drank cocktails like it was the first time in our lives. Obsidian, the nightclub we'd only heard about in rumors, was dimly lit, its music pulsing through the air, the crowd shimmering beneath flickering lights. I remembered laughing. I remembered someone's hand brushing my back. I remembered 2 more cocktails brought by a stranger behind the bar. I remembered turning away, then looking back to find my drink replaced, the scent of mint and berries, and then everything fading. "They drugged my drink?" I whispered. Lucas nodded, a shadow passing over his face. "I saw it happen. By the time I got there, they were already leading you toward the back exit." I didn't have another choice. I stared at him, searching for something in those eyes that could make me trust him. But all I found was a bottomless depth, cold as a Chicago winter night. "Who are you really?" Lucas sat down in the chair opposite, his body relaxed, as if he'd been waiting for that question. "Lucas Moretti," he said slowly. "I run a chain of businesses, some legitimate, some not entirely so. My family's been in Chicago for 3 generations. We don't ask permission to exist." I froze. That name wasn't unfamiliar. It appeared in headlines, whispered in conversations at the cafe where I worked. Lucas Moretti, the shadow over the city, the man no one dared to mention too loudly, the one who could make a person disappear with a single phone call. And now I was sitting in his bedroom, wrapped in his blanket, listening to him speak calmly about saving me from men even more dangerous. "I don't know anything," I murmured, as if trying to shield myself. "I'm just a girl who makes coffee by day and studies at night. I have nothing to do with any of this." Lucas said nothing for a while, simply watching me. "I know," he finally answered, his eyes softening. "That's exactly why you became an easy target. They didn't need to know who you were. They just needed a message, a way to get to me through the people around me." A cold breath left my chest. Only a day ago, my biggest problems were an unfinished essay and an overdue electric bill. Now I was a pawn in a war between men I didn't know and didn't want to know. "I can't stay here," I said, almost pleading. "I need to go home." "No," Lucas replied, his voice low, firm as steel. "Not yet." I trembled. "Are you keeping me here?" He stepped closer, stopping just a few feet from the bed. "I'm keeping you safe, Claire. There's a difference. And I don't intend to frighten you. But if you walk out that door now, they'll find you. And next time, I might not be there in time." Silence fell. My heartbeat thundered so loudly I feared he could hear it. I didn't know what he was or what he wanted from me, but one truth settled deep in my bones. I had just stepped into a world where escape was no longer as simple as opening a door and walking away. Lucas said nothing more. He moved away from the bedside, walking toward the walnut desk placed against the wall near the window. Every motion of his carried a kind of cold precision, so controlled that I couldn't tell if it was calmness or danger carefully disguised. He opened a drawer, pulled out a black tablet, and quietly stepped back toward me. "I think you should see this," he said, his voice rough, as though scraped by something deep within memory. I hesitated for a few seconds before taking it. His finger had already queued up the video. I looked down at the screen, and the world before me began to reel like a damaged film. Security footage, a high-angle view, the dim, pulsing light of Obsidian Club. I saw myself in the frame, standing by the bar, laughing at something Maya said. My brown hair hung loose, my wine-red lips curved into an unguarded smile. I didn't recognize that woman as me. She was radiant, carefree, utterly unaware of what was about to happen. The video went on. I turned away, probably speaking to Maya. 2 men appeared beside me. They wore dark shirts, not conspicuous among the crowd, yet their eyes were furtive. One of them bent down and slipped something into my cocktail. I saw the motion clearly, so clearly that my stomach twisted. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, harsh and unrelenting. The footage continued. I turned back, lifted the glass, and drank, thoughtless, just as I had done at every birthday celebration before. Minutes later, I began to sway. Maya's back was turned. She saw nothing. The 2 men exchanged glances. One touched my elbow, pretending to steady me, but his hand was steering me toward the back exit. The camera shifted to another angle, the alley door, dim light spilling across the floor. I watched myself being led away, my steps unsteady, and then Lucas appeared, sudden, fierce, like a storm stepping out of the dark, He didn't speak. He simply moved forward, seizing one man by the collar. The expression on his face in that footage made my blood run cold. The second man stumbled back, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear, but Lucas didn't need words, only that look. Within seconds, both were dragged off by two other men I didn't recognize. I watched as Lucas caught me in his arms, careful but alert. He carried me toward a car, the image blurred and faded. I remembered nothing of those moments, but now I knew. I knew how close I had come to the edge of disaster. My hands trembled as I set the tablet down. My throat tightened until I couldn't speak. "You see it now," Lucas said, his gaze fixed on me. "It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a nightmare." I nodded, unable to believe that in a matter of minutes my life had nearly veered onto a path of darkness, shame, and no return. "Why me?" I whispered. "I'm nobody, just ordinary." "Precisely because you're ordinary," Lucas replied, his voice soft as the air before a storm. "They knew nothing about you. They just needed to cause damage by targeting anyone even remotely connected to me. Maya is Jake's sister. Jake works for me. You were with Maya. That's enough." I looked into his eyes and felt as if I were standing on the edge of a cliff. "And you saved me." "I don't save people I don't intend to protect completely," Lucas said, slow and deliberate. "And from that moment on, Claire, you fell within my sphere of influence whether you wanted or not." I stayed silent for a long time after Lucas finished speaking. His words were not quite a warning, nor an order, but something closer to a sentence delivered with such calm finality that resistance felt impossible. I couldn't tell what chilled me more: the realization that I had become an unwilling target in a Mafia conflict, or the knowledge that Lucas Moretti had quietly taken control of my life from that very moment. When I finally looked up, he had already turned away, striding toward the double doors of the room. "Come with me," he said, without glancing back. I had no choice but to tighten the blanket around me, slide off the bed, and follow him in silence. We walked through a long marble corridor where the first light of morning filtered through wide glass panels, spilling pale gold across the floor. Everything inside the penthouse exhaled power, refined, restrained, and quietly terrifying. Lucas stopped before a dark wooden door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. It was a vast office lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a walnut desk strewn with papers, and two large monitors glowing faintly. He gestured for me to sit in the chair, opposite his. I obeyed, clutching the blanket tighter around my body, feeling small and out of place amid the immaculate order of the room. He picked up his phone, scrolled briefly, then set it down. "You won't be returning to your old apartment," he said, as though announcing something as ordinary as a change of weather. "I've had your belongings collected, the place locked, and the rent paid for the next 3 months." I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised a hand to stop me. "I didn't do this to control you. I did it for your safety. That apartment has no security, no cameras, and the door would give way with a single kick. You could be taken in 10 seconds if I let you go back." I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump rising in my throat. "What about my job?" Lucas nodded, as if he had anticipated the question. "I spoke to your cafe manager. They received notice that you're dealing with a family emergency and will be taking an indefinite leave. Your position remains secure." I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. "And my classes?" He turned his computer screen toward me. An email glowed on the monitor, sent from the student support office, a formal leave of absence request signed with my own address, one I had never written. "I know your password," Lucas said simply, as though he had just mentioned knowing my birthday. "And I used it when necessary. Everyone believes you're caring for an ill relative. You can't just do that," I stammered, the air thickening around me as if the books on the shelves were closing in. "I didn't ask for permission," he replied, his voice calm to the point of indifference. I acted, because if I'd waited for your consent, you might not be alive long enough to give it. I didn't know whether to be angry, grateful, or terrified. Every decision had been made for me, every door in my life locked, the key resting in his hands. "So what do I do now?" I asked, my voice small, like a child lost in a forest with no way home. "You stay here, for as long as necessary. I'll make sure you have everything you need. Meals, someone to accompany you if you wish to go outside, and security around the clock. You won't have to worry about anything, except the loss of my freedom," I murmured. Lucas leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady, not angry, not sympathetic. "That's true, but you're still alive, Claire. And to me, that's the only thing that matters right now." I left Lucas's office feeling as though I were walking through a dream that had been quietly distorted. The apartment was too quiet, the order too precise, so much so that every sound, the fall of my footsteps, the rustle of the blanket against my skin, the soft click of the door seemed unnaturally amplified. I moved slowly down the hallway, trying to steady my breathing, trying to gather the disarray of thoughts swirling in my mind. I should be grateful. He had saved me from something terrible, stepped in when everyone else turned away. He cared about my safety enough to rearrange my entire life with a few phone calls. But that very thought made it hard to breathe. No one had asked for my opinion. No chance to choose. My freedom had been replaced with a carefully designed schedule. Acts that looked like kindness were in fact invisible chains, binding me to a place gilded in gold but cold as a prison. I stopped before the large glass window overlooking the city. Chicago was waking up. Streets buzzed with cars. People moved below like thin, hurried streaks in the morning light. I used to be among them working, studying, rushing through the days with a paper cup of coffee in hand and a small dream of a better future. My freedom had never been grand, but it was mine. Now I'd been pulled out of orbit and thrown into a world ruled by someone else's decisions. The safety I felt in this apartment didn't come from peace. It came from the awareness that I was being watched, protected not out of care but because I was something that couldn't yet be lost. I didn't know who Lucas saw when he looked at me. An innocent woman in need of protection, a ghost of someone he'd once known, a pawn, or simply someone he hadn't decided what to do with yet. I stepped back from the window and returned to the bedroom. On the table, someone had set a breakfast tray, orange juice, toast, and sunny-side-up eggs. Beside it lay my phone, its screen glowing with a message from Maya. "Are you okay? Lucas said you needed some time off. Call me when you can." I typed, "I'm fine. It's a long story. I'll reach out soon," then deleted it. Rewrote, deleted again. Finally, I set the phone down without replying. I couldn't explain what was happening. Even I didn't fully understand the situation I was in. Part of me wanted to run to scream for my right to decide, to shove open the door and flee into the restless light outside, where I could choose for myself whether to fail or succeed. But another part whispered that if Lucas was right, if the world beyond truly waited with unseen eyes, then this was the only place that could keep me safe. I sat on the edge of the bed, my gaze drifting toward the black dress folded neatly on the chair, the dress that had started it all. Some part of me knew that even when this ended, I would never again be the old Claire Mitchell. I had crossed an invisible threshold, and what waited on the other side wasn't just life or death. It was a quiet, irreversible transformation. I don't know what made me leave the bed that morning, perhaps the tightness in my chest, or the instinct to reclaim at least a small piece of control. I put on the white shirt someone had laid out in the closet, long enough to fall past my thighs, and stepped barefoot onto the cool marble floor. The penthouse was larger than I had imagined. With each step, new rooms opened before me so silent I could hear my heartbeat echoing inside. I passed through a vast living room with high ceilings, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off amber leather chairs and modern paintings aligned in perfect symmetry along the walls. A grand piano sat near the window, black and glossy, a solitary accent in a space too flawless. I touched one of the keys lightly. The note rang clear, resonating through the air like the echo of something that had never begun. Beside it stood a towering bookshelf filled with hundreds of leather-bound volumes arranged by color, each row disciplined like soldiers at attention. I had expected this place to feel cold, lifeless, a composition of money and power. But it didn't. It breathed. It carried traces of someone who had lived and thought within these walls for a long time. There were details no one else might notice, but I could feel them. A porcelain cup resting slightly askew on a shelf, a book folded halfway through, a diffuser still releasing a faint scent of mint into the air. I continued walking, past an open kitchen lined with white marble counters, where a middle-aged woman was arranging fruit on a platter. She glanced at me, smiled softly, and bowed her head without a word. I nodded back, the sense of displacement rising again. Everyone here seemed to know their role. Everyone except me. At the end of the corridor, a glass door opened onto a balcony as wide as a terrace. I pushed it open, and the city unfolded beneath me. From the 34th floor, Chicago stretched toward the horizon, the steel bridges cutting across the river, the skyscrapers gleaming, cars streaming below like lines of tiny ants. The wind brushed my hair and skin, carrying the mingled scent of water and smoke. I sat on the long bench by the railing, gazing at the view, feeling both small and strangely free, as if I had momentarily slipped out of reality. I had lived only a few blocks from here for years, yet I'd never known this world above. Existed a world with the power to look down, to command, instead of chasing life minute by minute. A world of quiet seduction. I knew I shouldn't feel that way, but the truth was, I was beginning to grow accustomed to it, the cleanliness, the stillness, the illusion of safety wrapped in silk. I could sleep as long as I wanted, without the drip of a leaking ceiling or the rumble of morning garbage trucks. I could eat meals I hadn't prepared, wear clothes already pressed smooth, live among art, books, and sunlight filtered through glass that seemed to cleanse away all the city's grime. And Lucas hadn't appeared that morning. No orders, no piercing stare, only this silence, left deliberately for me. It felt like a test, as if he wanted to see what I would do when no one was watching. I tilted my head back toward the sky, the light spilling across my lashes. Part of me wanted to hate him, to keep my distance, to remember who I had been before I stepped into this place. But another part was drawn to it, to him, to this strange new world that was slowly pulling me in, grain by grain, like fine sand slipping away beneath my feet. Even as I stood perfectly still, I was sitting in the library, a quiet room tucked away at the end of the corridor, where the light softened through the curtains and the faint scent of old wood mingled with coffee drifting from the machine by the wall. Resting on my lap was a photo book of modern European architecture, its spine worn as if someone had turned its pages hundreds of times. I flipped through slowly, my eyes pausing on a picture of a glass house deep in the Norwegian woods, its roof curved like a wave, its glass walls mirroring the pines outside. I didn't know why it drew me in, perhaps because it stood in complete opposition to the concrete world I found myself imprisoned in. The door behind me opened softly. I turned, and Lucas stepped in with that same familiar presence, silent, yet heavy enough to shift the air around him. He wasn't wearing a suit as he usually did, only a gray crewneck sweater and dark jeans. The sudden simplicity of it caught me off guard, and it took a few seconds before I managed to speak. "I thought you'd be busy all day." He glanced at the book in my hands, then sat in the armchair across from me, the only thing between us a low wooden table. "I didn't expect you to pick that one," he said, his voice lower, softer than usual. "Most people skip it." "I like houses with a lot of glass," I said, then let out a small laugh. "Even though I'm afraid of heights." Lucas didn't laugh, but the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. He stared into the empty air for a moment, then spoke as if to himself. "When I was a boy, I wanted to be an architect." I blinked, surprised. In my mind, Lucas Moretti was the embodiment of everything opposite to a boy sketching buildings with a pencil. "Really?" He nodded. "I used to draw for hours. I'd sneak behind my recent, grandmother's bakery, where the brick wall was cracked and the old wooden table sat under the window. I'd sit there with scraps of paper and a black ink pen, sketching rooftops and pillars. I wanted to build places that made people feel peaceful when they walked in." His voice faltered. I didn't speak, just waited. Lucas took a slow breath before continuing. "But my father was different. He believed that the men in the Moretti family didn't build houses, they protected them. He rarely spoke, but every look of his carried the weight of an inheritance, a burden I wasn't allowed to refuse." Something fragile surfaced in his steady tone, not anger, but a quiet regret. "I learned how to run things, how to control, how to read people. But I never forgot the feeling of holding a pen and watching a space come alive on a blank page. That was the only time I ever felt everything was truly in my hands in a good way." I looked at Lucas as though seeing him for the first time. Not the infamous boss who ruled through fear, not the man whose name silenced a city, but someone who once had a small dream and buried it deep inside himself. "You could still do that," I said softly. "You could build anything you want." He looked at me, longer than usual. "Money doesn't bring you back to the things you've abandoned," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "Some roads, once you've gone too far, you can't turn around." I didn't know what to say, but in that moment, surrounded by shelves of books and the amber glow of light, I no longer saw Lucas as the man controlling my life, but as someone trapped inside his own fortress, a place where every window opened onto the city, yet none led outside. I wasn't sure when the shift happened, maybe when he spoke about those old sketches, or when his gaze met mine not as a watchful guardian but as someone searching for something personal, something wordless. The air in the library thickened. Every sound, from beyond the walls, faded, leaving only the faint ticking of the clock and the shared rhythm of our breathing, steady and fragile between us. Lucas was still seated, but he no longer leaned back as before. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, eyes fixed on me, as though holding back words he wasn't sure he should say. I didn't move either. We simply stared at each other, as if afraid that speaking would break whatever fragile thread hung between us. Claire, he said my name so softly, so low, that it didn't echo in the air but went straight through my chest. My heart raced not from fear, but from something deeper, trembling and unfamiliar. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I gripped the book still resting on my lap. But under his gaze, I must have let it go without realizing. Lucas stood, slowly, circling the table. I should have stood too, should have stepped back, done anything to prove I wasn't affected, but I didn't. When he stopped in front of me, I could hear nothing but the pulse in my ears. He bent down, carefully, as if giving me time to retreat if I wanted to, but I didn't. I tilted my head up, eyes locked on his, and when his breath brushed against my lips cool as wind, warm as a small flame, I knew that every wall inside me had begun to give way. The kiss wasn't fierce, nor hurried. It began with the lightest touch, a question, a quiet test, then deepened slowly, tenderly, yet beneath it ran a tremor that made the world tilt. His hand came up to my cheek, fingers tracing the shape of my face as if memorizing it by touch, while mine clutched the hem of his sweater, seeking an anchor in the sweet, dizzying blur. I don't know how long we stayed like that, only that when he finally pulled away, my body was still trembling. His eyes stayed on mine, and something in them had changed. Softer, more vulnerable, yet somehow more dangerous. I shouldn't have done that, he said quietly, his voice roughened. But I've thought about it since the first time I saw you. I looked up at him, my mind spinning from what had just happened. I don't even know what I want anymore, I admitted. I don't know if I should be here, or run as far as I can. He nodded slightly, not arguing, not persuading. I know, he said, and I'm not sure whether keeping you here is right or wrong, but feelings don't always wait for reason to catch up. Outside, the wind stirred the curtains. I tightened my hands, not out of fear, but because I knew that from this moment on, the battle within me would no longer be between freedom and safety. It would be between myself and something growing quietly inside me, dangerous yet impossible to deny. The shrill ring of a phone tore through the quiet, making me flinch. Lucas moved swiftly out of the library, his phone already pressed to his ear, his voice lower and sharper than I had ever heard it. I stood up instinctively, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. When I stepped into the hallway, he was standing with his back to me, one hand gripping the balcony railing as though holding back fury. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice dark and hard as steel. A pause. "No, don't call the police. I'll handle it." He ended the call and turned. The moment his eyes met mine, I didn't need to ask. "It's Maya," he said quietly, but the words ripped through the air like a blade. "She's been taken." My ears rang. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. What do you mean? Taken by who?" Lucas stepped closer and caught my shoulders to steady me. "Costello's men. They sent a video. Maya's tied up and gagged, but she's alive. They want an exchange." "An exchange?" I repeated, my voice catching. "Exchange for what? For me?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He took out his phone, opened the video, and handed it to me. I didn't want to watch, but I couldn't look away. Maya sat on the floor, her hands bound behind her back, her hair tangled, her eyes wild with terror. A man stood behind her, his face covered, his voice distorted through a modulator. "If you want Jake's sister back, hand over Claire Mitchell. Alone. No games, no backup. You've got 36 hours. After that, we start sending fingers first." The screen went black, and I felt myself detach, as if my body no longer belonged to me. My breathing grew heavy, my throat filled with stone. Lucas slipped the phone away, his eyes never leaving me. "I won't let that happen," he said firmly. "I've got a team tracking them. We'll find where they're keeping her. And if you don't," I whispered, my voice hollow, as though coming from somewhere far away. If Maya dies because of me, I'll never forgive myself. This isn't your fault, Lucas said sharply, but I shook my head. She was taken because she was with me, because she's my friend. They're using her to get to me. I'm the weak link. No, he said, stepping closer. You're the only light in this entire network of shadows. That's why they fear you. I met his gaze, a storm raging inside me. Then to save her, I have to go. I'll give myself up. Lucas's hands clenched, his eyes turning cold as ice. Absolutely not. If I'm the one they want, then I'll go, I said, my voice steady now. Maya doesn't deserve to die for your war. And you think they'll let you live once they have you? His tone hardened to a growl. They don't need you alive. They just need a blow that hits me where it hurts. Then what are you going to do? I shouted. Wait until they start sending Maya's fingers, one by one? I can't sit here, drinking cold orange juice and pretending I'm safe, while my best friend is murdered because I happen to matter to you. Lucas stared at me. The man before me was no longer the one who had kissed me in the library, but a soldier, a leader standing face to face with the dark. I'll bring Maya back, he said, every word measured, unshakable. By any means necessary, but not by trading you. You're not currency. I trembled, unsure if it was fear or something deeper. His voice carried something more than authority, something that felt like a vow, and for the first time in my life, I believed that Lucas Moretti was not fighting for territory, or pride, or revenge. This time, he was fighting for me. I couldn't sleep all night. Every time I closed my eyes, Maya's face appeared, the terror in her eyes, the ropes digging into her wrists. Every frame of that video replayed endlessly, like a verdict carved into my mind. I sat in the living room, the soft glow of the floor lamp spilling gold across the glass table, a cup of tea gone cold between my hands. Outside, dawn hadn't yet broken. The city was so quiet I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the windows. When Lucas entered, he was dressed in a dark shirt, phone in hand, his expression hard as steel. But when he saw me still awake, a flicker of fatigue crossed his eyes. You should rest, he said, his voice low and rough. I can't, I answered, setting the cup down. I've been thinking all night. We're wasting time. He sat across from me, placing his phone on the table. We're not wasting time. We're making a plan. My men are tracing the video's signal. They left a trail. I'll find her. How long will that take? A day? 2? I shook my head. Enough time for them to do something that can't be undone? I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. Let me go. Lucas didn't react immediately. He just looked at me for a long, unbearable moment, as if waiting for me to take it back. But I didn't. I'm serious, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll go, alone, exactly as they asked. You can follow, hide your men, do whatever you need to do, but I'll be the one standing there. No, he said sharply, the words slicing through the air like a blade. I won't allow it. She's my friend, I said, my pulse pounding in my ears. I can't stay here, protected, while she's out there fighting to survive. Lucas shot to his feet and strode to the window, bracing his hands against the glass frame. His shoulders were taut, every line of his body drawn tight beneath the fabric of his shirt. You think I don't understand? He said, his voice low and edged with something close to pain. I've lost people in trades like this. There's no such thing as a fair exchange in their world. If you walk in there, they'll kill both of you. But I can't sit still, I whispered. I can't live knowing someone else is dying because of me. Lucas turned. For the first time, I saw something crack behind his steady gaze. You don't understand, he said quietly. I'm not afraid of losing Maya. I'm afraid of losing you. His words caught in my chest. In that instant, there was no mafia, no kidnapping, no war, only a man looking at me as if I were the one thing he couldn't bear to lose. I stepped closer and laid a hand on his arm. Then let me do this, I said softly. Not because I want to die, but because I want to live without guilt. Lucas looked at me, his gray eyes deep and searching. Then slowly, he nodded. All right, he said at last, but we'll do it my way. You'll go to the meeting point, but I'll control everything from a distance. I'll have a tracker on you, snipers surrounding the area, and if there's even a second of danger, I'll pull you out. I nodded, agreed. He turned away, lifted his phone, and began giving orders, his voice cold, clipped, precise as a commander's. I stood there, watching him transform into the man the city feared, the ruthless strategist, the boss whose word meant life or death. But I also knew something else. Among everything he fought to protect, I was no longer just a hostage. I was the one he couldn't afford to lose. And Maya was the one he would save so I wouldn't have to sacrifice myself. And that, I realized, was the only kind of choice I could live with. The black car came to a stop in the southern Chicago warehouse district at 4 o'clock sharp, exactly as instructed. I sat in the back seat, fingers clutching the edge of my coat, a cold sweat sliding down my spine despite the late autumn chill. My heart was pounding so fast it felt ready to burst. Each beat a reminder that somewhere in one of those derelict buildings, Maya was waiting terrified, alone, and counting on me to get it right. A tiny earpiece had been fitted into my left ear before I left the penthouse, linked directly to Lucas, who was stationed in a surveillance van with his men, circling the area within a 1-mile perimeter. Lucas had told me I wouldn't be doing this alone, that he would see everything through the button camera sewn into my coat, that if anything went wrong, his team would move in immediately. But sitting there in the stillness, surrounded by cold metal and silence, I felt like a pawn pushed onto the board of a game where lives were the stakes. Lucas's voice filled my ear, low and composed as always, though I could hear the tension only I would notice. "Claire, steady your breathing. Walk straight toward the red metal door. There's a camera above the left corner, don't look at it. Everything's under control." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me, then pushed the car door open and stepped out, each movement heavy as stone. Inside the old building, the hallway was dim, shafts of pale light cutting through holes in the leaking roof. My footsteps echoed, followed by a distorted voice from the shadows ahead. "Stop. Don't move any closer." I froze, my pulse tightening in my throat. A man stepped out, from the darkness, wearing a long coat, his face hidden behind a mask that left only cold eyes exposed. "Claire Mitchell," he said, his voice rough and low. "You're quite the expensive commodity." "I'm here," I said, my own voice sounding distant, foreign. "Let her go." He laughed, a dry, grinding sound like gravel. "Not so fast." He motioned with his hand. 2 men emerged from behind him, pushing forward a small, bound figure, head bowed, hair tangled. My heart stopped. "Maya," I whispered, but she didn't respond. Lucas's voice whispered in my ear. "Hold position. Team 2 is in place. Keep your eyes on her." I gave a faint nod, my gaze locked on my friend, every muscle tensed and waiting to snap. The leader approached me, holding out his hand. "Give me your hand. You come with me. She goes free." I hesitated. "Claire, 5 seconds." Lucas's voice commanded through the earpiece. 4, 3, 2. Just as my fingers brushed the word, icy hand of the man before me, the door behind us burst open. A series of sharp pops shattered the air. White smoke flooded the room. Everything unfolded like a slow-motion film. Shouts, running feet, someone yelling, "Protect the target." Then a strong arm yanked me down to the floor, shielding my body completely. I couldn't see anything but smoke, couldn't hear anything but the crack of suppressed gunfire. Less than 2 minutes later, silence fell. Lucas's voice came through, clear and certain. "You're safe. We've got 3 of them in custody. Maya's being brought out now." I pushed myself up, gasping, trembling from head to toe. And then, through the thinning haze, I saw her Maya being led out by a tall man. She was conscious, exhausted, but alive. Tears blurred my vision. Not from fear this time, but from the miracle of it. She was here. I was here. Alive. Still whole enough to believe that, for the first time after everything, we had won a battle not with power, but with trust. Maya had been brought back safely. Lucas's personal doctor examined her thoroughly before moving her to a separate apartment guarded 24 hours a day. I hugged her tightly before leaving. Neither of us said much, only exchanged clasped hands and tearful eyes. But when the penthouse door closed behind me, the air still felt heavy, as if the danger hadn't truly passed. Lucas was waiting in the hallway, his expression nothing like that of a man who had just won a battle. He led me silently to the living room, where the warm lamplight spilled across the furniture like a thin veil of smoke. I didn't ask, but he knew what I was waiting for. "This didn't start with you," Lucas said, his eyes fixed not on me but on the city beyond the glass. "Not entirely." I sat down on the couch, fingers interlaced, waiting for the rest. "Years ago, Costello had a woman, he began, his voice low and steady. Sophia. She was the only weakness I ever saw in him, intelligent, gentle, but she didn't belong in his world. And then one day she vanished. He paused, choosing his words carefully. They said she was killed. Some claimed Costello did it himself, suspecting betrayal. Others believed his own family erased her to eliminate risk. But no body was ever found, and Costello, he never spoke her name again, until the day he saw you. I felt my heart sink, every cell in my body freezing. Me? Lucas nodded. The first time I took you out to that little cafe in the West Loop, one of Costello's men spotted you. He sent him your picture, and within 30 minutes, the order came down. Get the girl. At any cost. Because I look like her? I asked, my voice barely audible. Not just look, Lucas said, meeting my eyes. You're almost her reborn. The way you walk, your eyes, even your voice. I don't believe in coincidences, but when I first met you, I didn't understand either. Not until I dug through old files, compared photographs. Then I saw it. I leaned back, staring up at the ceiling as if somewhere there might be a logical reason for such a terrifying coincidence. So I'm what, a ghost from his past? A threat? An obsession? Lucas moved closer, taking the seat across from me. Both. To Costello. You're a wound that never healed. And what drives him mad is that you're here with me, that I have what he lost. This isn't about territory anymore. It's personal now. It's revenge. I didn't know what to feel. Horror, disbelief, or simply emptiness. I was no longer a person in these men's eyes. I was a shadow of someone dead, the spark for a war I never knew I was part of. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Lucas's gaze didn't waver. Because I didn't want you to think you were someone's replica. Not to me. When I look at you, I see Claire, not Sophia. But you deserve to know the truth before this goes any further. I said nothing. I wasn't sure I could. I just sat there, silently wrapping my arms around myself as the weight of realization settled in. From this moment on, I knew I wasn't just fighting the darkness outside, but the ghost of a woman I had never met, whose shadow was now living inside my own reflection. I left the living room in silence after Lucas spoke the name Sophia. But the shock followed me all the way into the bedroom, settling over the walls like a dense fog I couldn't clear. I stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection, trying to find what in it was truly mine, and what might just be fragments of someone else's memory forced upon me. I didn't know who Sophia was. I had never heard of her, never seen her face. Yet suddenly, she had become a part of me, as if I'd been living her life without knowing it. The thought that I might be nothing more than a replica of a woman long dead made it hard to breathe. It didn't just leave me lost, it blurred everything I had believed to be real. The feelings between Lucas and me, were they real? Or was he only loving again through me, the ghost of a woman he'd once lost? I wanted to believe the way he looked at me was genuine, that his touch, his tenderness, weren't replacements for someone else. But how could I ever be sure, when my entire presence in this story began with another woman's shadow? I had barely stepped out of the room, still dazed, when Lucas handed me a small envelope. There was no name on it, only an embossed silver-gray logo of a rose bound tightly by its own thorns. The messenger left it downstairs, he said. No one got a clear look at his face. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of thick cream paper, the handwriting dark and curved, cutting across the page like a blade. Claire Mitchell, I want to meet you, alone. No Lucas, no surveillance. The location will be disclosed tomorrow morning. If you refuse, we will consider you to have chosen his side, and the consequences will no longer be words. Below it, a signature, Vincent. A chill rippled through me. The name Vincent had been mentioned only in passing, an obscure shadow within Costello's network. A dangerous man, cunning and unpredictable, and now he wanted to meet me. I didn't know why. Perhaps because I looked like Sophia. Perhaps he wanted to see for himself whether I really was her. Or perhaps there was something deeper, something I couldn't yet see. But what I did know, with a clarity that cut through my fear, was that I couldn't keep running. I was already part of this game, and if I didn't step forward, the people around me would keep paying the price. Maya had already proved that. I sat on the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in my hands. I thought of the way Lucas had looked at me when he said I was me, not anyone else. I wanted to believe him, but to do that, I had to face the shadow. Both of us were still trying to outrun. I had to meet Vincent, not to obey him, but to understand. To find where truth ended and illusion began. And perhaps, for the first time since this chaos began, I would be the one holding the power of choice. No one else. Not Lucas, not Costello, not Sophia, only me, Claire Mitchell, and the truth. I held Vincent's letter for a long time, gripping it so tightly that the edge of the paper left faint marks on my fingertips. My mind was a blur of unanswered questions, fragments of Sophia, of Lucas, of my own life, none of which had ever truly belonged to me. Vincent wanted to meet me, alone. No Lucas, no one else, just the two of us, standing in that gray zone where power and deceit intertwined. I knew it wouldn't be a harmless encounter, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid in the same way as before. It wasn't the fear of being controlled, kidnapped, or hurt. It was the fear that if I didn't face this myself, I would spend the rest of my life wondering who I really was, whether I was someone worthy of trust, or merely a shadow filling the void in another person's past. I said nothing as I walked into Lucas's office. He was standing behind his desk, studying a map spread wide before him, marked with dozens of routes and coordinates. When he looked up, concern flickered in his eyes, the kind I had come to recognize. "I'm going," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. Lucas frowned. "No, you're not meeting him alone. Vincent isn't like the others. He's dangerous in ways people don't see coming. That's exactly why I have to meet him," I replied. "Not for you, not for Maya. For me, I need to understand why I'm at the center of all this. I need to look him in the eye and hear the truth myself." "I'm not letting you walk into a wolf's den," he said, stepping closer, his tone dropping low. "You don't understand how men like them operate, Claire. To them, promises are weapons. If you go in there without anyone behind you, you may never walk out. And if I keep living under your protection," I asked quietly, meeting his gaze, "am I really myself?" I saw something shift in his eyes, fear, frustration, maybe both. "I know you care," I continued softly. "I know you want to keep me safe, but safety isn't what I need. Not the kind that someone else gives me. I need the truth. I need the right to face it." For a long moment, Lucas said nothing. His face was torn between reason and emotion, between the protector he had always been and the man who loved me. At last, he exhaled, weary and defeated. "If you're going," he said quietly, "then promise me one thing. Wear a tracker. I won't interfere, but if anything goes wrong, I won't stand by." I nodded. "I'm not trying to die, Lucas. I just don't want to live in the dark anymore." He stepped closer, his hand rising to my face, warm and slightly trembling against my skin. "You're stronger than you think, Claire. But remember this, no matter who you are in the eyes of others, to me, you've never been anyone's shadow." I didn't answer. I only leaned into his touch for a brief moment before stepping away. The decision had already been made, not out of romance, not out of sacrifice, but because I needed to rewrite my own story. And the next chapter would begin not with waiting, but with confrontation. The restaurant was inside an old riverside hotel, a European-style building with low crystal chandeliers and dark walnut-paneled walls. The waiter led me through a private corridor where the lighting softened and jazz music breathed quietly through the air. I pushed through a thick glass door and saw him, Vincent. The gray suit was immaculate, tailored to fit the posture of power. His black hair was slicked back, his face unreadable. But it was his eyes that made it hard to breathe, the eyes of a man who had lost everything and learned to turn loss into control. He rose as I approached, polite in a way that felt almost cruel, pulled out my chair, then sat again. There was no greeting, no small talk, only silence so dense it seemed to shape the air between us. "You really do look like her," Vincent said at last, his gaze fixed on my face. "Sophia." "I'm not Sophia," I answered. "I know." He inclined his head slightly. "Sophia never looked at me the way you just did. She was softer. You," his eyes narrowed, "you have the gaze of someone who's seen the world as it truly is." I stayed silent. Vincent tilted his head, his voice low and unhurried. "Lucas knows who you are. He knew from the beginning. But he kept you close. I can't decide whether that was for you or for the game he's always playing. I'm not anyone's prize," I said, lifting my chin. "I chose to stay, and I chose to come here." Vincent let out a short, dry laugh, one without joy. "You're brave, but bravery doesn't save anyone in our speeding. world. How long do you think Lucas can protect you? A week? A year? Until he realizes you no longer carry her ghost the way he remembers it? I didn't come here to talk about Lucas, I interrupted. I came because I want to hear the truth from you. About Sophia. About why I've been dragged into all of this. Vincent leaned back, the light striking the sharp planes of his face, sculpting him into something almost inhuman. Sophia betrayed me. She was planning to leave, to take secrets that could have brought down everything I built, but she didn't make it that far. Someone got to her first, not me. But no one believed that, not even Lucas. And what do you think I am? I asked quietly. Sophia reborn, here to finish what she started? Or just someone who wandered into a tragedy that was never mine? Vincent didn't answer right away. He studied me for a long time, then leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. I think you're an opportunity, a hinge. You could tip the balance between us. The question is, which side will you choose? I'm not choosing sides, I said, my heartbeat rising in my throat. I'm choosing the truth. And if that means forcing both of you to face what you've buried, then so be it. For a fleeting moment, something like respect flickered in Vincent's eyes. Then he stood, placed a small card on the table, and said, Sophia left something behind, a recording. It will be sent to you. When you see it, you'll understand why everyone is afraid of you. He turned and walked away without looking back. I sat there, alone, my hands trembling as I picked up the card not from fear, but from the quiet realization that everything I thought I knew was only the visible tip of something far deeper, colder, and waiting below the surface. And from this moment on, there would be no turning back. By the time I returned to the penthouse, the sky had already darkened. My steps felt heavier with every echo of Vincent's words, like a voice from a past I had never lived but somehow carried within me. Lucas was waiting in his office, his gaze sweeping over me, half relief, half suspicion. I didn't speak right away. I simply handed him the card Vincent had left behind. Lucas took it, set it on the desk, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw the exhaustion behind the composure of a man who had always seemed unshakable. He didn't ask any questions, but I couldn't stay silent forever. I needed to speak, not just to explain, but to keep myself intact amid the web of truths closing in on all sides. The night at the club, I began, my voice slow, even. There's something I never told you. Lucas looked up, his eyes fixed on mine, waiting. I remember stepping out onto the balcony for some air. A man approached, not flirting, not casual, but like he'd been looking for me. He called me Sophia. I thought it was some bad joke, but then he handed me a Dash's cocktail. I drank it. I paused, the bitter taste returning to my throat, as if that drink had never left me. After that, everything blurred. I remember the music, the flashing lights, and someone helping me into a car. I didn't see his face, only the sharp scent of cologne and a small scar on his left wrist. Lucas's jaw tightened, a glint of steel flashing in his eyes. A scar, shaped like a V? I nodded. He turned away, grabbed his phone, typed something fast, then set it down. His name is Marco, used to work for Vincent, a double agent who disappeared about a year ago. I suspected betrayal, but there was never proof. I took a step closer. You think this was planned from that night? That I was bait? Lucas nodded once. The perfect bait. When he realized you looked like Sophia, he pushed you into my orbit and then let the chaos unfold. But there's one thing he didn't expect. What's that? That I'd actually care about you. Not as part of a strategy. The word stopped me cold. Before I could respond, the phone rang, its sharp tones slicing through the heavy silence. Lucas answered and said only 3 words. Bring him up. Within a minute, 2 large men entered, dragging someone with bound hands and a bowed head. When he lifted his face, I recognized those eyes, the same face, altered but unmistakable. Marco. Lucas approached slowly, like a predator confident its prey had nowhere left to run. I'll give you the chance to speak before I do, he said evenly. Marco smirked, a hollow, hopeless smile. It was just business. Orders. Whose orders? Vincent's. But things went too far. She wasn't supposed to die, but she was essential. I stepped forward, meeting his gaze. I'm not Sophia, and no matter who you think I am, I'm still alive. Alive enough to destroy everything you built. Marco said nothing. Lucas gave a brief nod, and the men led him away. When the door closed, I let out a long breath. My heart was still pounding from facing the man who had turned me into a pawn. But this time, I wasn't the victim. This time, I was the one who had looked darkness in the eye and called it by its name. A week after the confrontation with Marco, everything moved so quickly that I could hardly tell which direction life was shifting toward. Secret meetings, whispered exchanges between rival factions, silent negotiations in the dark, all of it led us to that particular morning. Lucas hadn't said much when he woke me early. He simply told me to dress simply but neatly, and that today would be the day everything ended. We drove to an old mansion on the northern outskirts of Chicago, where rows of maple trees had turned crimson, and the lake behind it lay still as glass. Inside, the great hall glowed with pale amber light. Vincent was already there, seated among several men whose names I recognized, the kind of names that had kept Lucas wary for years. No one smiled. No one shook hands. Yet, somehow, their silence was its own form of agreement. Lucas never took his eyes off Vincent. I sat behind him, for the first time fully feeling the weight of a war I had never chosen, but had somehow become the center of. A document was placed on the table, long, formal, filled with cold legal phrasing, but its essence came down to a single line. Both parties agreed to abstain from interference, retaliation, and to respect the right of every individual to choose their own path. Vincent was the first to sign. No hesitation, no glance toward Lucas or me. Then came Lucas. His hand was steady, deliberate, as though he had waited a very long time for this moment. When he finished, no one clapped, no one offered congratulations. The room was filled instead with a silence that felt like warm air after a long, bitter storm. Vincent rose, straightened his jacket, then turned to me. From here on, you choose for yourself. No one owes. No one owns you, and no one has the right to drag you back into any of this. I met his gaze. And Sophia? What was she, really, to any of you? He paused for a moment. Someone who dreamed of leaving this world, but never had the time. He turned and walked away before I could ask more, leaving with his men as though the past had finally been folded and set aside neatly, without regret. When only Lucas and I remained, he turned to me. His expression softened, though a faint trace of caution still lingered in his eyes. The agreement's signed. The war's over. Now, everything depends on you. I looked toward the window, where morning sunlight poured through the red maple leaves, and felt a strange emptiness inside. What do you mean? I mean you're no longer bound by any of this, he said quietly. No more danger, no more chase. You can go back to school, to your old life, start over, if that's what you choose. I didn't answer. Freedom, the thing I had once longed for, fought for, believed I had lost, was now standing right in front of me, like a door flung wide open. But what I wasn't sure of was whether, after everything that had happened, I was still the same girl who had first walked through that door. Lucas didn't urge me. He didn't plead. He simply stood there, giving me the first real choice I had been granted in a long time. And I knew, whatever answer I gave this time, it would finally be mine. The car rolled quietly along the road by Lake Michigan, the trees on both sides shedding their red and gold leaves like a carpet of memories left behind after a storm. I sat in the back seat, the window slightly open, letting the wind sweep through and toss a few loose strands of hair across my forehead. The afternoon sky was gray but not cold, as if the city itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Lucas sat beside me, his left hand resting lightly on the steering wheel, his right hand on his thigh, fingers tapping absently against the fabric of his pants. Neither of us had spoken since leaving the mansion. We didn't need to. But when the car turned toward the city center, he glanced at me. His eyes were stripped of their usual armor, laid bare in a way that left me nowhere to hide. What do you want after all this? The question slipped out softly, yet it struck every quiet space inside me. I turned to him, surprised not because he asked what I wanted to do, or whether I planned to leave, but because he asked what I wanted. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a test. It was permission, for the first time. I stayed silent for a few moments, watching the skyline appear through the windshield, the tall buildings standing like memories, familiar yet distant. I'm not sure, I admitted. Everything happened so fast. I'm not the same Claire I was months ago, but I don't know who I am in this picture either. Lucas didn't interrupt. He just waited. I used to think I wanted freedom, I said, to get away from this. From you. From all of it. But now that I actually have it, I've realized freedom isn't something you can hold on to easily. It's like water, the tighter you grip it, the faster it slips away. I turned toward him, looking at the man who had walked with me through all the chaos, the darkness, the fragile hope, and the pain. I don't want to go back to my old life, but I also don't want to stay because of guilt or obligation. I just need to know if I stay. Will it be my choice? Will it be because I choose to love you? Lucas's face stayed calm, but his eyes deepened like a still surface hiding an undertow. I'm not holding you, Claire, he said quietly. I never meant to. Everything I did protecting you, hiding you, keeping you in that penthouse, was because I was afraid of losing you. But if you walk away for yourself, I won't stop you. And if I stay? I asked. His fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel, a faint smile touching the corner of his lips. Then I'll build a world safe enough for you to be yourself in it. Not a shadow, not a target. Just Claire. I looked at him then, feeling my heart beat not from fear this time, but from something larger, something that felt like being seen. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes, listening to the city slowly awaken after days of silence. And I knew, whatever tomorrow might bring, at least today I had the right to choose my own path, and maybe, just maybe, the person beside me wouldn't lead the way, but would walk with me, not to control, but to listen. That night, as the city came alive with light and the cold wind slipped through every window pane, I stood alone on the balcony of the penthouse's top floor, looking down at the streets that pulsed like the living veins of Chicago. Below me were headlights, hurried footsteps, the restless rhythm of a world I once believed I belonged to before everything changed. The wind swept my hair back, carrying the chill of the lake mixed with the faint, smoky scent of the old neighborhood. I closed my eyes and let the images drift through my mind like a film played in reverse. The small apartment with its leaking ceiling and the refrigerator that groaned through the night. The cafe where I counted every tip to pay for my classes. Maya's laughter echoing beside me as we skipped lectures to walk by the lake. And then, the night of the birthday. From that moment on, my life shifted course. I used to believe everything had been stolen from me, my safety, my plans, the simple dreams I once held. But in that chaos, I found something I had never dared to hope for. Someone who truly saw me, even when I no longer recognized myself. Lucas never promised to change the world, but he gave me something far rarer, a place where I could simply exist. Not as someone's version of Claire, not as Sophia's shadow, not as a pawn on someone else's board, but as me, with all my wounds, choices, and mistakes. I could go back to school, to my studies, to the quiet life I once thought I wanted. But could I really sleep at night without thinking of everything I've survived, everything I've learned, everything I've lost and found again? I opened my eyes and looked toward the far side of the city, where the faint lights shimmered across the lake like a galaxy just within reach. The decision didn't come in a burst of revelation. It came softly like a breath. I didn't turn back, and I didn't walk away. I chose to stay. Not for Lucas, not for any promise, but because I had finally found what I was looking for, not freedom, but meaning. And here, in the city that once made me lose myself, I had learned how to stand on my own. No one to lead me, no one to define me, just me finally, enough. I found Lucas in the study, where the light from the desk lamp cast a slanting shadow across a map of the city that he hadn't yet put away. He sat there in silence, hands clasped, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular, as if he were retracing every choice he'd made since the day I walked into his life. When I entered, he looked up. The mask of composure couldn't quite hide the worry beneath his expression. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, his voice rough, the sound of someone who had just fought a battle within himself. I nodded, stepped closer, and took a seat across from him. For a while, we said nothing. Then I spoke slowly, deliberately, each word drawn from somewhere deep inside me. "I've been thinking a lot," I said, "about where I belong, about what I really want, and about you." Lucas didn't move, but I could sense the tension in him, every muscle drawn tight, as if he were bracing for a verdict. "You once told me I could leave, and you wouldn't stop me, that you wanted me to have a real choice, not one born from fear or debt." I paused, taking a deep breath. "And I know that if I walked away, You'd actually let me go. And that scares me more than any threat ever could." His eyes flickered, a small human tremor breaking through the steel. I stepped closer, not retreating this time. I've lost enough to understand that some people, if you don't hold on at the right moment, you lose them forever. And I don't want to lose you. Not because you saved me, not because I owe you, but because I love you. In a way I've never loved anyone before. In a way that makes me want to wake up every morning knowing that, no matter how chaotic the world gets, as long as I can see you, I'll know I'm still where I'm meant to be. Lucas looked at me as though he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Then his eyes softened, warmth spreading through them like sunlight melting the last of the snow. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Because if you stay, it won't just be love. You'll have to face the scars, the secrets, and the part of this world you once tried to escape." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't need a perfect love. I just need a real one. And if that means standing beside you through the darkness, I'm ready." Lucas didn't answer. He simply crossed the space between us and pulled me into his arms, holding me as though he'd just found something precious in a world that offered so little certainty. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer alone, no longer a shadow, no longer shaped by anyone else's choices. I had chosen, and this time, it was my heart that spoke. The next morning, I woke in Lucas's arms, sunlight filtering through the curtains and laying a soft, honey-colored glow across his skin. I stayed still for a while, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my ear, before quietly slipping away and walking toward the desk where my re-enrollment form still sat, untouched. On top of the pile was a half-finished sketch of an imagined structure, a terrace opening toward the lake, where natural light spilled across wooden floors, and the wind could drift freely through 3 open sides. Lucas came up behind me without a sound, his arm wrapping loosely around my waist. He looked at the drawing, then at me through the reflection in the glass. "You started sketching again?" I nodded. I never really quit. Everything just happened so fast that I ran out of space to keep going. He was quiet for a moment, then said softly, his voice low but certain, "Then keep going. Go back to school. Finish it." I turned to him, surprised. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Claire, you once told me you wanted freedom. I kept you close, not because I doubted your strength, but because I was afraid you'd disappear before realizing who you were. But now you know what you want, and that's what makes me unafraid." I smiled and tightened my hand around his. "I want to study again, but this time, not just to graduate. I want to build something of my own, maybe a space, maybe a future. I want to shape my life with my own hands." "There's an unused studio upstairs," Lucas said, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "It used to be where I drew blueprints back when I still thought I'd be an architect. Now, I think it belongs to you." I looked at him, a swell of gratitude rising in my chest. He wasn't just supporting me, he was trusting me enough to place a piece of his old dream in my hands. "I'll make it into something more beautiful than either of us imagined," I whispered. Lucas bent down and pressed a kiss to my forehead. "I don't doubt that for a second." And in that quiet morning light, I knew that even though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, I had a place to begin again. This time, I wasn't walking alone. I was walking with my sketches, my dreams, and a man who had given me not only his heart, but the faith to build a life of my own. On the highest rooftop of a building in the heart of Chicago, Lucas and I stood in silence beneath the night sky. Below us, the city glowed like a living map of untold stories of new beginnings, of endings quietly accepted. The shimmering lights stretched all the way to the horizon, reflected in my eyes as if to remind me of the road I had traveled. The night breeze moved softly through my hair, carrying the faint fragrance of the small rooftop garden Lucas had planted for me the day I officially returned to school. In that moment, surrounded by the pulse of the city, I thought about everything that had brought me here. From a girl who once woke up in a strange place, terrified and unsure of who controlled her life, to a woman who finally stood tall enough to choose her own path even when it hurt, even when nothing was certain. I had loved, I had doubted, I had fought with myself, but in the end I understood. Strength isn't the absence of fear, it's the courage to keep walking despite it. Lucas's hand tightened gently around mine, a silent reminder that he was here, and would remain here, not to lead me, but to walk beside me. True love isn't possession. It's the space wide enough for 2 people to grow, to live honestly as themselves. This story isn't just about power or secrets. It's about reclaiming your own voice in a world that constantly tries to quiet you. It's about courage, about choice, and about love placed exactly where it belongs. And if you're still watching at this point, maybe you too carry an untold story inside you, a decision you've postponed, or someone you've never quite let go of. Share with us what this story stirred in your heart. Did it make you think of someone? Of a relationship? A dream long set aside? Or perhaps a turning point you've been afraid to face? We truly want to hear from you, your real feelings, your truth. Don't forget to subscribe to our Fire channel so you won't miss the stories that touch the heart every day. If this one moved you, please like and share it so its message can reach others who may need it. And leave us a comment below, tell us what part resonated with you most. What moment made you feel something deep inside? We read every word with genuine gratitude. Wishing all of you watching this video good health, peaceful days, and the courage to stand by your own choices. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.